Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about biodiversity. Yesterday, you should have watched a video called Lethal Seas. You should have watched part one, and it kind of introduces some biodiversity and kind of talks about some issues that is actually happening in the environment relating to the ocean. Now, we're going to kind of dig in a little bit deeper. We're going to discuss a couple different things, and you guys are going to watch the other two sections of Lethal Seas in the next day or two. So, first and foremost, biodiversity stands for the variety of living things in an area, including plants, animals, bacteria, and fungi. So, if we're going to use the words abiotic and biotic, we're talking about all of the biotic factors inside of an ecosystem. Okay, so your biodiversity is all of the biotic factors or all the living things in an area. So one of the first things we're going to talk about is something called ecosystem diversity. And we've already talked about what an ecosystem is. We've talked about large ecosystems. We've talked about small ecosystems. That is totally fine, but we're going to talk about what actually ecosystem diversity is just as a whole. So ecosystem diversity goes to communities of living things and their environments. Ecosystems include deserts, grasslands, and rainforests. And things like Antarctica are covered almost entirely by an ice sheet and have very low biodiversity. So what we're trying to say here is that depending on the ecosystem, we're going to see a different amount of biodiversity. If you're in a place like Antarctica, well, there's not a lot of living things and it's just one big ice sheet, probably not going to have a lot of biodiversity there. But if you're somewhere like the rainforest, where there's a lot of vegetation, a lot of animals, a lot of insects, a lot of birds, that is going to give us a lot of biodiversity or a higher biodiversity. Now, if you want to tie this more into just say St. Michael or the Ellerville area, if you go to a place like say Crowhasset State Park, where they have native prairie grasses, native trees, birds, animals, that place has high biodiversity. But if you go to the cornfield straight across the way from the high school, that is called something called a monoculture, meaning that there's only one type of plant there. It just has a low type of biodiversity. And we're going to kind of talk about some of those things that make that a good thing and possibly a negative. The next one is called species diversity. So it counts the total numbers of species, and one of the things that says down below says tropical regions, areas that are warm year round, have the most biodiversity. Guys, this makes sense. If it's warm all year round, more species are able to live there, resulting in just overall more species. Okay? Now, we also have something called genetic diversity. So it says genes are the basic units of biological. Holy crap! My bad, guys. Of biological information passed on when living things reproduce. Some species have as many as 400,000 genes, and we actually are going to start talking about genes pretty soon. We have greater diversity, can make plants and animals more resistant to disease, and allow species to better adapt to a changing environment. So what we're trying to say here, and we're going to use humans as an example. Humans are 99.9% identical roughly. That means that 0.1% makes us different. Now, none of you guys look like me, which is probably a good thing. But all of us have similar genetics, but we are diverse enough that things are different. So for say if I have the cold and I come to class, not everybody in the room is going to get the cold because guess what? Our immune system's going to fight things differently compared to one another. Now this is going to tie back into the cornfield we talked about earlier. A cornfield is called a monoculture, and mono means one. So in a cornfield, you see one species of corn. Now here's the problem with that. If there is a disease that can wipe out corn, it's going to wipe out that whole field. Now let's say if you're in a forest and there is a disease that wipes out only oak trees. Okay? Now, all the oak trees die, but guess what? Other trees are still able to live. Things like spruce or pine, those trees are able to thrive. This happens because of our genetic diversity. Now, there's a couple of reasons why biodiversity is super important, and one of the biggest things is that all species are interconnected and depend on one another. So we can't lose a species. We have to make sure that all those things stay together and that they're living and they're thriving. And ecosystems with a lot of biodiversity are stronger or more resistant to disaster than those with fewer species. What they're trying to say here, what this is saying is that if something is able to get destroyed or die, if we have other things to take up its space, the ecosystem is probably going to last. But if we only have one or two species and those things die out, the ecosystem's ruined. So we have to make sure that we have a bunch of biodiversity to keep everything alive and keep everything together. Okay? Think of a food web, which we've already talked about. There's a bunch of different branches of the food web. We need all those branches there to keep an ecosystem happy and healthy. Now, we can decrease biodiversity, and typically it's decreased by human interaction, which is just kind of the nature of who we are. So biodiversity around the world has decreased dramatically and species have gone extinct. Now, you guys want to talk about numbers? I don't have exact numbers, but you can look it up. There's percentages of animals every single year that go extinct from like 1960s until 2021. Okay, go look it up, do your research if you're really truly interested in it. Now, natural habitats are decreasing due to construction buildings, cutting down trees for lumber and firewood, pollution, overfishing and hunting, climate change, and introduced species. So this is a pretty big topic. We're actually going to talk about each one of these little things in just a second. So just remember, biodiversity can be decreased. So threats to biodiversity. We should talk about a couple things here. It's going to sound kind of negative in about a second about what I'm going to talk about with humans. I just want you to understand that humans do their best to try to make things possible and make things actually work, but there are the opposite side of this where at points we just don't do the right thing. Now, it is rare that humans intend to make a species go extinct. Does it happen? Yeah, okay. But there is a couple threats to biodiversity. I want to just make sure we're all on the same page. So we're going to use an acronym. We're going to use the acronym HIPPO. Okay, this is not the physical beastly animal, the hippo. Now, if you were in class, would I probably make some jokes about a hippo? Heck yeah. Okay, I'll tell you that hippos are going to come to the Mississippi River. You guys don't believe me. It'd be a huge funny joke. But guess what? It's not going to happen. So we're going to talk about what HIPPO actually stands for, and we're going to use this acronym. So first H stands for habitat loss or fragmentation. What this means is it occurs when an area is harvested for resources and left unusable or unstable. So if you think of the area like St. Michael, Albertville, 20 years ago, it did not look like it does right now. It was a lot of farm fields, a lot of forests, a lot of different prairie grasses, but that is now gone because we have houses there, which is great. We need people to live here. We need houses. But the plants and animals that once lived here now have to inhabit a new area, and it's causing habitat loss. Number 2, invasive species. Since the colonization of America and just since the ability to move so rapidly from place to place to place to place, we spread a lot more invasive species than we really want to know. So one of the new invasive species that we talk about a lot in Minnesota is something called the zebra mussel. Now, zebra mussels are living in the water. They go from one boat to the next boat. And there actually has been some research that things like ducks will eat a zebra mussel, they'll fly to the next lake, and they might cough up a zebra mussel. Guess what? Now that zebra mussel is in that body of water, and it is an invasive species, and it's not good for the environment. Pollution. So the release of trash, plastics, or the discharge of toxic chemicals or heavy metals into the bioaccumulate in higher trophic levels. What this means is that as humans, guys, we are wasteful. We overuse what we have, and we kind of don't put the best things into the air, and we're not the best at recycling. As you guys are going to kind of realize from the movie Lethal Seas, is that pollution's causing a lot of issues when it comes to the ocean and dealing with how the ocean works and how the animals in the ocean actually thrive and survive. We will talk more about pollution, but it is a huge topic. If you're interested in it, guys, please reach out to me. We can have a huge conversation about it. It's something I'm pretty passionate about because pollution's a huge deal, but we have to make sure that we can do our best to make sure that our environment gets taken care of. Number 4, and the second P, is human population growth rate. If you looked at the human population, say 100 years ago, they would tell you that our human population would never be able to get as high as it is right now. But somehow we keep adding more and more and more and more and more humans. That means we have more and more and more space getting taken up. And that means we have more invasive species getting spread. That means we have more pollution getting used. And that also means that we are over-consuming a bunch of things to make us be healthy and feed us and give us transportation, all those different things. So the more our human population growth grows up, the more resources we are using, and the more you are going to see an impact on the environment. And now the last one is O, which stands for over-harvesting of natural resources and or species. So target species are typically overhunted, overgathered, overharvested, overfished. Now, this is not saying hunting is bad, guys. As you guys know, I do hunt. That's not what I'm saying here. But there was a time and there was a place where certain species of animals got eradicated or got pretty much all killed just because humans are like, oh, they're here, let's just kill them all. Now, we have licenses, we have limits for this reason to kind of help eliminate some of this overharvesting. Now, there's still illegal commercial fishing that happens. Can't stop it all. Okay? But there is different reasons, there is different things that come up to overharvesting. Deforestation is a huge one. We take too many trees down. We use too much paper. We have a problem there. Okay. Oil. We use too much oil. We're eventually going to run out. Okay. It might not be in my lifetime. It might not be in yours, but it's going to happen eventually. Now, when we talk about overharvesting, one thing I want you guys to understand is that there is ways that we can help eliminate or help mitigate our overharvesting. And there's a lot of simple little ways that we can. Now, things like using reusable water bottles, for sure, helps us stop using so much plastic and also helps with pollution. Okay, guys, there's little things we're going to talk about that can help with just keeping biodiversity there rather than having humans be like the bad person and kind of affecting it for the negative. Now, with that being said, that's all we're going to have today in this ed puzzle. Make sure you guys read the rest of the things on Google Classroom. If you guys have any other questions, please reach out. What I want you guys to make sure you understand from today is this acronym HIPPO: Habitat, Invasive Species, Pollution, Population Growth, and Overharvesting. If you got those, 5 things, you did pretty well today. Okay. Is there a couple other things here that are important? For sure. Knowing what biodiversity is, knowing genetic diversity is, all those things are super important. Once again, guys, if you have questions, concerns, issues, problems, anything like that, please reach out. Please ask. Let's chug along. Let's get finished with this trimester. Have a great day, guys. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.